Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Are we in the end times? Sure seems like it in some ways, doesn't it? With what's going on in Israel, Palestine, a lot of alarm bells going off. We think about Catholic prophecy, we think about scriptural prophecy, and this idea that there will be this seed of the Antichrist, this rebuilding of the temple, the coming back of sort of the Jewish messianic movement looking for the actual Messiah. I mean, all these things going on in the Middle East right now, they definitely have your end times spidey senses tingling. And if you look at what's going on the internet, YouTube creators, both Protestants and Catholics, many people are talking about prophecies of the end times. Now, I'm not here to tell you that the end times are coming. Personally, I don't believe that we are in the end times per se, because there are various other things that need to come to pass before the arrival of the Antichrist, which it doesn't seem like there's any evidence of them right now yet. You can read Dr. Taylor Marshall's book, Antichrist and Apocalypse, for a detailed account on that. And if you'd like, you can listen to the audiobook, which I did narrate, which is available on audible.com. If you look up Antichrist and Apocalypse on audible.com, you will find that book. But the fact that many people do believe that in these times in which we live, there is the possibility of being in the end times and the Antichrist being nigh, this is not a crazy concept, and you're not crazy if you think that. In fact, if we do look to the writings of the great saints like St. Gregory the Great, St. Jerome, and others, St. Vincent Ferrer, we do find at various times during church history that there was this insistence that the end times were upon us, and they had good reasons to believe those things. And who knows, it could have been that the end times were around the corner and they were conditional and they were pushed back because of the prayers and the supplications of the faithful. It could be that God allowed the end times to come, within an inch, within a razor's edge of coming true in order to inspire the Catholic faithful to save their souls and for the Gentiles and the pagans and so forth to convert. Could be. But whatever the reason is, and whatever time we're in, there's a big difference between looking at the end times from a material perspective and looking at the end times from a supernatural perspective, And this is what I want to touch on today. If you think about how people speak about the end times. Think about the average person, whether Protestant or Catholic, talking about the end times. What do they say? What are the things that they think about doing? Is their first response or their first inclination when you're talking about the end times to say, well, because of that, we should all go to confession and we should pray our rosaries with more fervency? Is their first response, we should be spending more time in adoration? Is their first response, we should be settling our debts? Is their first response, we should be catechizing our children stronger? Is their first response, we should be focusing on the lasting things that will save our souls? Or is their first response something like, well, the end time's around the corner, make sure you get a lot of ammo. The end time's around the corner, make sure you get some land out in the bush. The end time's around the corner, make sure you get a water purifier. I'm not trying to ridicule being prepared. There is a sensible reason why one can take whatever means they believe to be necessary in order to be prepared for various calamities. Of course, people want to make sure they have clean drinking water, food resources, ways to protect themselves, places to go. I mean, this is fine. I mean, this is, you live in a time of terrorism and cataclysmic economic events and natural disasters. I mean, there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, it's okay to have a little bit of fire insurance. I'm not ridiculing that whatsoever. But I do think that when we do speak of the end times and the first response that people have, and it's very common, and be honest with yourself, you've probably thought like this before, I do think that there's a major problem when people see what they believe to be the end times on the horizon, that the first thing they go to so often is, what is my natural way out of this? Meaning, if there is the end of the world to come, how do I find a way to make a cabin in the woods where I'm self-sufficient? I think that's a huge problem, and I think that that is actually demonic deception. I'm going to explain why. Listen, I have soon-to-be 6 children. The idea of going through an end times, the idea of going through a global cataclysm, keeps me up at night. Not actually, I don't actually sleep pretty well. But my point is it really does disturb me. I mean, I've talked about this with friends, and I was talking to one buddy who's very well versed in the end times literature. And I said, oh man, I can't even keep talking about this because the idea of this happening right now, it just sucks as a man with children. The idea that my kids could go through some sort of calamity. But then when I look at what has happened historically to people who have gone through various calamities, their children have had to go through times of plagues. They've lost children. Children have lost parents. They've gone through times of war. I look at the scenes coming out of Israel and Palestine right now. The children who are being destroyed, whether they're Arabs or whether they're Jews, it's an absolute tragedy. And there are parents alive right now who they are going through times where they're losing their children to these disasters, and it is beyond tragic. When we think about the end times, we got to understand that if the end times truly come, there will be no escaping the Antichrist in the woods. There will be no escaping the forces of the New World Order, of the persecution of the Christians, of those who have apostatized and are out for blood. There will be no way of escaping by going off into some off-the-grid scenario. And if we're being honest, God will be sending us that because the end times will be the opportunity for us to save our souls. Why we have to be in that time is up to God to decide. It's not my place to know. But that we will be in that time, if that's in fact when we're alive, is part of God's providence. And the response is not to run. The response is to embrace the martyrdom. Just like the Christians who lived in the early centuries. Many of them, they believed they were in the end times under, emperors like Diocletian and so forth. And they had good reason for it. You couldn't go outside and wear a crucifix around your neck without getting your head cut off. It seemed pretty end timesy. You could look at the emperor of Rome, who was sort of a false messiah, believed himself to be a god, as being some sort of end times figure. There was reasons to believe this. So when we think about all these things, we have to remember, what is the purpose of the end times? The purpose of the end times is that the end of the world will come. Christ will come. He will judge the living and the dead. There will be a new creation. There will be a new heaven and a new earth. This cosmological reality we live in now will pass away. This is why the anti-Christian cosmologists have to always be trying to prove that there is no real beginning point in the universe, or that there is a eternal universe, because they need to deny the cosmology of Christ, which is the true cosmology. So to bring it back to the end times, if when we hear of end times, we're thinking to ourselves, well, the most important thing for me is to make sure I have a bunch of canned food, drinking water, and a lot of ammo, then we're giving into the temptation of the devil there to think about surviving the end times from a natural perspective rather than embracing what God will send us for our supernatural salvation. I'm not saying I have the strength for it. I'm not saying that I'm prepared to be a martyr. I'm not saying any of those things. I'm just saying if I, to use a pagan expression, if I read the tea leaves and I look at what is required of us for our end times perseverance, it has nothing to do with ammo. It has nothing to do with drinking water. It has nothing to do with these false prophets talking about refuges and things like that. These false prophets on the internet. It has nothing to do with going into the woods and having a bunch of vegetables in our cellar. It has to do with being in a state of grace and being ready to die. And what we should be taking from this, if we do have any anxiety about the end times, is that all of us are going to face our end times at any moment. In fact, this could be the last YouTube video you ever watch in your life. Do you ever think of that? This could be the last YouTube video. This could be the last moment of your life. You could be watching this right now. In fact, as sad as it may sound, somebody may be dying at this minute who is watching this video at the same time as you. Their end times have come. Your end times may be while you're sleeping tonight. And no amount of ammo, no amount of drinking water, no amount of refuge in the forest, no amount of off-the-grid cabin in the woods is going to save you. You will stand in front of Christ when you die, whether that happens to be during the reign of the Antichrist, which may be now, or maybe in 1,000,000 years. Or you may die right now. And no matter what, you will be facing your judgment. Are the end times here? They could be. Who knows? Many great saints in the past have thought they were, and they just simply weren't. We shouldn't think ourselves to be any wiser than they were. But whether they are or not, to prepare for them is a matter of a spiritual nature, not a matter of a natural nature. And if you get those things confused, you're doing the devil's work. As always, let me know what you think in the comments. This has been the Kennedy Report. Until next time, God bless.